Welcome to New Life's Adventure in Discipleship series. One of the most important parts of your life of discipleship is prayer. Prayer is one of those 7 essentials of being a follower of Jesus. Some wonderful things to note along the way in your adventure in prayer is given by Jesus in Luke chapter 18. We've got a number of parables that Jesus tells, and here in Luke 18 he tells 2 more parables in giving his instruction to his followers in prayer. This one is so that we pray and don't lose heart. I'm going to read it out for you. This is Luke 18, 1 through 8a. Then Jesus spoke a parable to them that men always ought to pray and not lose heart, saying, there was in a certain city a judge who did not fear God nor regard man. Now there was a widow in that city, and she came to him saying, get justice for me from my adversary. And he would not for a while, but afterward he said within himself, though I do not fear God nor regard man, yet because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. Then the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge said. And shall not God avenge his own elect, who cry out day and night to him, though he bears long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. There's a couple things to note along the way in this wonderful parable and in your own adventure in prayer. First, Jesus says in verse 1 that this is so that you don't lose heart, or grow weary might be another translation. I'm actually not very familiar with that happening in the lives of the people I meet and talk with within the life of the church. Usually what I found within the life of the church is that the older we get and the longer our life of discipleship continues, the farther along we are in this wonderful adventure. People are praying more. That passage is so very true, that our conversation becomes more and more in heaven, that the life of prayer increases. I have been more familiar with those who lose heart when it's early on in their discipleship. They get this picture of God actually being evil is what they harbor and think about. And so they don't pray. They lose heart for prayer because they have a picture of God as an unjust judge. That God does not care, and that he is somehow fickle or not fair, and so why pray? I'm so glad that Jesus addresses this directly in this parable. You noted in verse 2 that he calls this person the unjust judge. But you know that things are not real in this parable. For instance, note that Jesus sets up this unreal parable by talking about a persistent widow. But Jesus, in the context of explaining the parable, says, you are not a widow. A widow in Jesus' day was a person who had no one to care for them, who had no one to take up their cause, who could expect no other help, who actually had to, I suppose, use their own nagging to get some kind of attention and help. But what Jesus says in this section, he tells you who you are, you know. And it doesn't say you're a widow. You are not. You are God's very own chosen ones. And so too, in this unreal parable, God is not unjust. In the parable, he presented that way through the telling of the parable with that persistent widow. But the reality is, you are chosen by God, and God himself is the just one, the justifier. He is described and given a wonderful word by Jesus in verse 7. He is the avenger, the right maker. He is the good, the pure, the never weary in verse 7 and then verse 8. And he is eager and desires and is speedy to answer you. Do you see how Jesus addresses the unreal visions we can get in our hearts that so often will derail prayer and our desire to pray and our zeal to pray? He puts it all up and he knocks it all down. And he tells us who you are and who God is. And that's why you pray. And that's how he gives you energy to pray. And that's why Jesus spoke this parable, to directly address the things that might be in your heart or mind that are unreal, and to instead call you forth to pray always to the one who cares about you so very much and who speedily desires to hear from you.